Okay, so today we begin with the objectives of philosophy of education. Now we have spoken about the perspectives in the last class. Today we'll take a look at the objectives and then gradually we'll come to the basic concepts that are there. So first and foremost, we need to realize that education is not only a producer of wealth. We see that education is a producer of citizens. So last time we spoke about education creating responsible citizens. So as a result of it, we see that citizens require freedom of mind. Okay, they need to become engaging. Okay, they need to be critical. They need to be trained to ask questions. Okay, and therefore one of the goals and objectives is also to produce informed and engaging citizens for the nation. Okay, so let's take a look at education's role as a producer of good citizens. So as we see that it extends beyond wealth creation. Okay, it's not only to get jobs, but it goes beyond that. And therefore, as we said, it aims to produce informed and engaging citizens who will think creatively and work for progress. Okay, and therefore, education should not create robots. And therefore, some of the essential skills for a democratic nation and for a successful democracy, first of all, include freedom of mind. That means the person should be able to think and should have the freedom to express himself or herself. Okay, so that freedom, that disposition should be available. Okay, so also they need to think critically and they need to ask questions. Now we see that when questioning happens, okay, then that can lead in a way to progress. Otherwise, we see that there is some kind of stagnation. So therefore, normally we tend to be stuck with one particular view, one particular opinion. When we think critically, when we question, only then can we go beyond. Next also is analyzing text for accuracy and logic. Now in today's world we see that there's quite a big influence of dramatization. So in order to get more views, in order to get their ratings higher, we see that news channels sometimes tend to distort certain facts. Okay, for example, if many of you all are familiar with clickbaiting on YouTube, so that means the thumbnail will have some particular very fancy kind of a picture to get your attention, but the content may not be anywhere related to it. Okay, same thing also happens with our media today. And as we have seen in the current era, there are certain amount of text which have been distorted, certain things have been hidden, and also attention has been given to irrelevant issues. And therefore, education or philosophy of education will create people who can analyze texts, check them. Okay, because sometimes we see that when forwards come on WhatsApp, we immediately tend to forward it to others without checking accuracy. Okay, so in a way, therefore, anything that is presented to us, we need to have that disposition to check for accuracy. Also, we see that it rejects poor reasoning and poor arguments. So, if your arguments are strong, we see that anything that you propose will have effect. If there is no logic in your arguments, if there is no flow in your presentation or in your thought, we see that it becomes difficult for you to have a convincing argument with the other. That is why when we study logic, we have certain kind of arguments, certain kind of ways how we can prove certain things. Okay, so all this is important. Also, imagining alternative possibilities. Last time we spoke something about problem solving. You can either look at the problem or you can either search for the solution. And therefore, imagining other alternative ways, other possibilities helps to create a kind of a developing pattern in society which encourages growth. And next, importantly, is also having empathy and understanding diverse perspectives. Okay, so because we live with a wide range of people, and therefore we need to accept and embrace diversity. It is only when we do that can we achieve development. Okay, as we know, empathy basically refers to the ability to put oneself in the shoes of the other, to feel how the other person is feeling. And it is only when this happens, we see that a leader can then propose something for the betterment of all. Now we also see that when it comes to philosophy of education, it also critically evaluates certain aims or certain objectives of education itself. So first and foremost, we see that these aims which are there have been proposed by different philosophers over the course of several centuries. And what are these aims? These aims are first and foremost character building. Okay, that means creating morally, socially sound people. Okay, so not only those who are interested in achieving but also doing things in the right manner. Next is also comprehensive human development. So last time we spoke about this, that is an all-round development of the person, not only providing them bookish knowledge but also providing them skills so that they are able to handle any situation and do anything they can in the society in a proper manner. Next is also, we see that civic life training. Person should know how to behave in society, adjust to various situations. Next, you also have social and national integration. Okay, the person should be able to get along, the person should be able to handle any kind of pressure, any kind of situation. Another aim is also to achieve scientific and technological development. So, the resources are there and these resources should be used adequately or effectively in order to achieve progress and development. Another important aspect or aim is also to provide equal educational opportunities so that people from various strata are able to get the maximum of government schemes and policies. Now sometimes we see that because certain schemes, certain policies do not reach the people. Even if the person is talented, he may not be able to shine, he may not be able to perform. So therefore, giving equal opportunities is another aim of education. And finally, human resource development, which we see is quite a priority in today's world. So now, what is the role of philosophy in education? Okay, so in philosophy of education, we look at how philosophy criticizes or critically evaluates, okay, the general education theory. Also, there is critical evaluation and reflection on any policy, on any curriculum that has been proposed. And thirdly, we see that it leads to a synthesis of educational facts and values. So now we come to the scope of philosophy of education. So first and foremost, we see that philosophy of education confines itself only to the field of education. Okay, and namely, it is a kind of a philosophical discourse. It also looks at what are the problems that the education curriculum or the education policy of a particular nation or a particular state is facing, and therefore analyzing the problems, looking for solutions. It provides various alternatives to enhance the human resources. Now, when it comes to the problems of education, now let us take a look at what some of these problems are. So, first and foremost, we look at interpretation of human nature. Okay, and how human interacts with the world and with others. Next also is the relationships with various components in the education system. And last we see, it also takes a look at educational values. Okay, and these are determined by philosophical values. Okay, so these are some of the concerns which philosophy of education will deal with. And therefore we see that the whole scope of philosophizing, the whole scope of finding out the best is what enables one to get the best out of the available resources. So now what is the nature of philosophy of education? So it comes under one of the areas of applied philosophy or the practical aspects of philosophy. And therefore we see that it uses various philosophical methods. Okay, so can anyone name some of the philosophical methods which you are familiar with from last year? Okay, so you have phenomenological, then hermeneutics, then which one? Okay, any other things? Analytical, good. Okay, so it uses various of these methods in order to uh, focus on the educational policies. Next, we also see that it focuses on, as we have said, examining and solving problems related to education, utilizing philosophical methods, concepts, and theories. So we see that philosophy of education as applied philosophy basically deals with the practical relevance of education. It's an interdisciplinary approach and it also provides normative guidelines as to how education must take place. So here we see that philosophy of education will tend to look at certain issues which are relatively important. So first and foremost, we see that when it comes to practical relevance, it will address real world issues and it also aims to improve teaching practices and also educational policies and the curriculum. Now, being an interdisciplinary approach, we see that philosophy of education will draw from various areas like ethics, epistemology, then political philosophy, similarly psychology, sociology, in order to and applies all the approaches, all the theories of these fields into the educational area. Next, critical examination of the aims and values. And it aims at effective education. And finally, it provides normative guidelines as to what education should be suggested. It also suggests certain ethical principles, certain educational goals, and certain policies for improvement. So, generally, we see that these are the four main areas where philosophy of education as applied philosophy has relevance for the educational system. Now let's take a look at a few functions of philosophy of education. First and foremost, we see that it determines the aim of the education, and this is generally based on the needs of the place. It also harmonizes old and new traditions. As we saw last time, just because the era has changed, we cannot move out of the old traditions. We need to integrate the old and the new. Also, it provides education with progressive vision in order to make education relevant for the future. And as we see, it also prepares the younger generation to face the challenges available in the future. So, with this, now let us take these two questions. Okay, so once again, let's divide ourselves into those groups of four. Okay, and let's discuss these two questions for around 10 minutes. Okay, so at least we can have the discussion in class itself. So, first and foremost, how do different philosophical perspectives influence the aims and methods of education? Can you identify examples of these influences in the current educational practice? Okay, and next is, in what way or in what ways does the philosophy of education address issues of justice, equality, and moral development in today's educational settings?